When great Osiris had thus spoken, and commissioned his god and lords to the harvesting of earth and heaven for another cycle, then the dawn of Dan was finished. Order reigned in heaven and on earth, because a man, a god, had spoken. Men and angels had their eyes turned inward, to know of what capacity Jehovah had made them. And the earth, moon, sun and stars were shown in a new light to the sense of men, not to be shunned and despised, but glories given by the Great Spirit Jehovah for useful purposes. Jehovah had said, "Some men I, Jehovah, created to reason upon events near at hand, others to speculate upon events in remote regions, with thoughts diverse and unlike in procedure. Do not think, O man, that in high heaven such men become all alike, for I did not create them so, but to run in their various extremes forever. Of the first, Osiris, my son, enthroned to give reason practice, did not come at a random period, but just when I, Jehovah, had designed to sow the seed of unbelief and broadcast it over earth and heaven. For such seasons as follows appear in all peoples under the sun, a season of belief, a season of unbelief. And with the believing is the practice of truth and love, and with the unbelieving is the practice of great research and learning, with cruelty and disputation, which are arguments." Osiris said, "Send for my resurrection, O Jehovah, for I, Osiris, have uprooted the evil of idol worship, the extreme that follows too much belief. I have opened man's eyes to your corporeal worlds, and set a mark on man's souls, so that no more shall man come from earth to heaven, saying, 'Alas, I have no corporeal knowledge.'" Jehovah said, "To further man's ultimate glory, I, Jehovah, have decreed the earth to lie in fields for 3,000 years, in which your fruit, O Osiris, shall have its full growth." Osiris foresaw the times and places in the future road of earth and heaven, and that from his decrees, the decrees of Osiris, would spring corporeal philosophy, the first of earth, to which man would look back in future ages, saying, "From there sprang the Assyrian system, from there, the Assyrian, or Assyrian, races, for the sound, substituted for O makes a word earthly that was heavenly." And yet he, Osiris, looked further on, when men would become idolaters in disbelief of spiritual things, doing worship to the sun, moon and stars, and in very corpor profess to find the cause and foundation of all. Jehovah said, "Man shall search all things in order to find me, but I, Jehovah, gave this labor not to one generation of men, nor to those of 100 or 1,000 years, but to cycles, which are known as Dan has cycles. For when I come in Cosmin to found my kingdom on earth, man shall have the testimony of all speculations and philosophies before him, together with their fruits. And he of humanity shall judge that which is good by the evidence of past practices." High in the ark of Seng rose Osiris' call, where millions waited, knowing the dawn of Dan on the red star was near its end. Swift messengers told the story of Jehovah's work, through his son, Osiris, and, measuring the width of his harvest, laid the scheme at the feet of the reigning goddess, Antwa. And she gave the word, "Go," to her legions in waiting, who had moored in Abijah, afloat, a fire ship, ready to proceed for the hosts redeemed by great Osiris. And amid music and dancing, they, the legions in waiting, cut her loose, the Abijah, with 5 million souls aboard, commanded by Edicene, goddess of Antwa's garden in Etherian plain, where 10 billion souls dwelt, a place of rest, for gods and goddesses to regale, to entertain themselves with stories of redemptions of mortals on the countless stars floating in Jehovah's Etherian veins, his Etherian roadways. The Abijah, the pride of Edicene, steered off to the red star, the earth, for the marriage festival of 7 billion brides and bridegrooms, the yield of Osiris' harvest for the upper kingdoms. Meanwhile, Osiris and his hosts, prepared in the usual way, waited for the signal, the coming of Jehovah's light within the earth's vortex. For strange as it may seem to gods and men, everything in the firmament is upward. Those who leave a star, a planet, rise upward. Those who leave an Etherian world for the stars also rise upward, but call it downward, to suit the understanding of mortals. In that way, then, the Abijah, with the hosts of Edessene, pierced the vortex of Atmospheria, with Edessene and her hosts still traveling upward, when the ship pierced the Atmospheria of Earth. But then, perhaps as they of the crew reoriented the ship, they seemed to themselves to be traveling downward, for their orientation must have changed at some point. Nonetheless, the brides and bridegrooms shouted with joy thereafter. And the millions of guests, assembled to witness the awe-inspiring ceremonies, joined in applause. Then down came the ship of fire, brought as a sea, with all her appurtenances, her equipment and accessories, in trim, and, adorned in majesty, she descended to the floors of Vibrage. And from the mantles of light came Edessene, to salute great Osiris, in the name of the great spirit Jehovah, and receive his contribution, the contribution of Osiris, to the unchangeable worlds. Osiris, with his attendants, the archangels of Lotsin, received Edessene under the sign of Ormids, master creator of power, and then he, Osiris, presented his delivered sons and daughters, 7 billion. Due ceremonies were proclaimed, and upon completion, the brides and bridegrooms of Jehovah entered the Abijah. Osiris saluted God, who was ordained to be ruler of heaven and earth for the next 200 years, and, with sorrow in his soul, Osiris departed, going into the Abijah, the fire ship, for a higher heaven, where waited millions of loves, calling to him to come home. Then upward rose the mighty ship, commanded by the slender Edessene, the young goddess of Antwa's garden, her little hand stretched upward to Jehovah, by her mighty faith, commander of the elements.